What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Dog Dish. It's a big week this week. The trial games start tonight, and I'm previewing all the trial games as well as the All-Stars game. Lots to talk about. Let's get straight into it with tonight's game. Let me get it up on my phone because I don't have the teams memorized, but I know it is the Warriors versus the Tigers tonight. One of the great games to start rugby league being back. Now, obviously, it is only preseason. I did say trials. It's technically the preseason challenge now, although, not a lot of people love that concept, but that's what it is. As I said, Warriors, Tigers, what other game would you want to start a preseason or an NRL season with than a potential spoon bowl? It's in New Zealand, this game as well, which is kind of cool, especially with the All-Stars game being played in New Zealand on Saturday. But let's get straight into the team lists. Now, some of the team lists just overall I have looked at, but some I haven't as well. So this will be interesting. So the Warriors team list at fullback, Tane Tuapiki. Apologies if I pronounce some of these names wrong. Marcelo Montoya, Braden William. Villa. Oh, I know his name. Viliami Vele. Oh, I know that guy's name. I'm sorry. I used to know. I can pronounce it in my head. Edward Cozy, Luke Metcalf, one to watch. Tiamale Martin, Bunny Afoa, Freddie Lussick, Tom Ale, Jackson Ford, Demetric Sifakula, Michael Seo, Mayu Zion, Sanelli Akosietino, Ali Leitaua. I'm so sorry. Jacob Lebon. I'll tell you what, when it comes to pronouncing names, the NRL needs to go to every club, get every player from the top 30 squad, the New South Wales Cup squad, SG Bull and Flake, all like 60 players, however many it is, 60 to 100, and just get him in front of a camera and say, my name is Winston Neville. Like, don't make them say Winston Neville, make them say their name and get them pronouncing their names, because it makes everyone's job easier. Whether you're in professional media or independent media, you can pronounce everyone's names right. It's such a little effort thing. The clubs can put it on their website or on their socials, and it would make life so easy. I don't know why that hasn't happened yet. But that was the Warriors team. Obviously, there's an extended bench as well, but no names jump out to me on that. Obviously, it's a bit of a mix of like their first graders, but also some young blokes as well. I think, as I said, Luke Metcalf, he stands out to me. He's signed with them from the Sharks, and nobody's really sure if he's going to get a start. Some people were suggesting he might start at fullback, others at 5'8". He's in my fantasy team as well. That's why I'm like, ooh, is he going to start or not? Because I put him in my fantasy team because I thought he was going to start. Obviously, Sean Johnson would be the 7, and then it's out of Mare Martin and Chance Nickel Clockstad for the fullback position, assuming Metcalf is 5'8". So it'll be interesting to see who they go with there. Obviously, Metcalf probably wanting a good performance in this game to get himself in the spine somewhere. As I said, Mare Martin halfback. He won't be the Warriors halfback, but he'd be trying to land himself somewhere in the squad. Bunny Afoa, obviously he's probably going to be somewhere in the forward pack. Freddie Lussick maybe trying to get himself a bench spot with Egan, obviously the hooker, and then Montoya on a wing. I find it interesting that they've gone with the wingers as starters and not the centers. So I wonder if they're sort of fighting for positions as well. For the Tigers, this is kind of interesting. We'll go through the team and then I'll bounce back and talk about what's interesting about it. Charlie Staines at fullback, Junior Tupou on a wing, Kapoa, Talau centers, Scolari the other wing, then Tristan Riley, Brendan Wakeham, Stefano Uitkamanu, Jake Simcombe, Aitasi James, Brandon Tumeth, Fanua Pole, Justin Matamua, Jareem Buller, Jordan Hill, Trey Penny, and Josh Felaty. And nobody really jumps out to me. Oh, Alex Seyfarth is in the reserves, but he's really the only one that jumps out to me. An interesting lineup again. Obviously, they've gone even less first graders than the Warriors have. Obviously, Charlie Staines is the big one here because like Wakeham halfback, he's, depth. Kamanu as well. He's an interesting one. And Simpkin probably fighting for a bench spot. Kamanu, I find it weird that like no other forwards are really in their starting squad, but they are playing Kamanu. I wonder if he's sort of fighting for a spot in the 17 or in the 13. But Charlie Staines is the one that jumps out to me there because like they obviously signed him from Panthers, but they have what's his name? Mind blank. Dane Laurie. They've got Dane Laurie at fullback. And so you'd assume Staines is going to play wing. And from all reports that I've seen, I thought Staines was going to play wing. So naming him at fullback in the trials is interesting because like, why wouldn't you just name him on the wing if he's going to be playing on the wing? So does this suggest maybe the fullback spot isn't locked in and Staines has a chance to get the fullback spot? Yeah, maybe. So that's probably one to watch there, how Staines will go at fullback and then who actually gets that fullback jersey. So that is interesting to me. Let's move on to Knights Sharks. From memory, I think I sort of ran my eyes over this one. It's sort of a mixed bag of starters. The Knights have gone basically lots of starters, and then the Sharks not so much. So the Knights team, they've got Bailey Hodgson at fullback, Heimel Hunt, Christian Mapapalangi, Dylan Lucas, Greg Marju, Tyson Gamble, Jackson Hastings, Daniel and Jacob Safidi are the props with Jaden Brayley at hooker. Brody Jones and Jack Johns are the second rowers, and Kurt Mann is at lock. Phoenix Crossland, John Tolefoa, Lachlan Fitzgibbon, and David Hollis are the bench. In the extra reserves, there is Adam Clune, and that's all I recognize there. Obviously, there is, as I said, they've sort of named not close to a full strength team, but definitely more of a full strength team than you generally see in trial games. So they've got Bailey Hodgson at fullback, which is interesting because obviously with Ponga moving to 5'8", Bailey Hodgson was set to get that fullback spot, but now they've signed the young guy from Sharkies, Lockie Miller. Ironically, they're playing the Sharks, and ironically, Sharks have named the dude they got from Knights in this trial, but we'll get to that later. So Bailey Hodgson, probably a chance to try and get a fullback jersey ahead of Lockie Miller, although I don't see that playing out for him. Unfortunately, he'll probably be the backup fullback. Tyson Gamble at 5'8", obviously his first game in Knights colours, trying to sneak his way into the squad. I dare say he'll have a good crack at being the 14 off the bench. Hastings, I'm keen to see how he goes behind this Knights forward pack, which is half full strength, half not. Obviously, I'm high on him as a signing after what he did to the Tigers. I think the Knights are almost flying under the radar off the back of signing Hastings, so that's exciting. The Saifidi brothers, obviously, they're probably going to be their starting props. They need to take another step, I think, in the NRL, go to a new level if the Knights want to be playing finals footy. Brayley looking to get a full season under his belt after he started injured last year. And that's sort of it. Phoenix Crossland probably trying to grab a bench spot over Tyson Gamble. But let's look at this Sharks side. Daniel Atkinson, Thomas Rodwell, Moeen Hiroti, Kale Iro, which I did a reaction video on the other day. Go check that out. It's on the YouTube. Samuel Stone Street, Wade Graham at 5'8", with Puru at halfback, Toby Rudolph, Jaden Beryl, Braden Hamlin Ueli, Teague Wilton, Jesse Colcorn, said that wrong, Jack Williams at lock, Cameron McInnes, Joshua Finau, Thomas Hazelton, and Max Bradbury. That's the name we're going to keep an eye on, are the bench. And Blake Hosking, that rings a bell in the depth, and Oregon Kafusi. I don't remember where I've heard Blake Hosking from, but that rings a bell. But the Sharks side are obviously not even nearly full strength. They play my Bulldogs next week, so they're obviously saving their big guns for week 2, which if you're in the top 4, top 8, you sort of don't play your starters in the first week of trials. And obviously with Wade Graham at 5'8", they're lacking depth in the halves to run out in the trials. I find that very interesting that they're running him at 5'8" and not in the forwards to get him more minutes as a forward. But like, as I said, they mustn't have much depth in the halves. Jaden Beryl, he's one to watch at hooker. He's been at the Jets for a while and he's always been good there, but never been able to take that step up into first grade. That's sort of it, except Max Bradbury. As I said, the young guy from Newcastle, there's lots of talk around Max Bradbury. So the Knights, it was basically a trade sort of. So they sort of traded Lockie Miller from Sharks to Knights, and then Max Bradbury went from Knights to Sharks. And the Knights, as I said, they needed a fullback because Kalen Ponga got moved into 5'8", and they only had young Bailey Hodgson to play fullback, who hasn't played NRL yet. So the Knights were sort of desperate for a fullback. They were talking about playing Gagai there. They're talking about playing Gamble there. But they signed Lockie Miller, who killed it for the Sharks last year on debut, had a couple of good games. But they did get rid of Max Bradbury, and all the Knights fans were actually fuming that they let Max Bradbury go, even though they got like a good fullback. So I think that just sort of shows how exciting Max Bradbury can be and how big his potential is, I suppose, that the Knights fans were blowing up, even though they got a fullback. Like, they didn't want to let Max Bradbury go. So that could be a really, really good pickup for the Sharks, not even just for this season, but for years to come as he develops as a player. So he's definitely one to watch and almost the most exciting player to watch in that trial game, to be honest. Let's move on to the other Friday night game. It is Souths versus Manly. Let's go over the South Sydney side first. They got Blake Taff, Richie Kenner, Josiah Karapani, Jacob Gagai, Leon Tehor, Dion Tipu. I'm saying so many of these wrong. NRL, please get us a video of the players saying their names. Jarrett Sublu, Haim Stelly, Peter Mamazulis, Davey Mull, one to watch, Michael Cheekham, Jacob Host, Tallis Duncan, Kalo, Ethan O'Neill, Ben Lovett, and Lewis Grossemi. Now, like, running my eyes over that team, I've heard of two of those dudes. And I don't know if that's me not knowing much about rugby league or if that's South Sydney not naming a good side. Obviously, Blake Taff, you've heard of, sort of went missing last year, actually. Like, he filled in for Latrell in the finals in 21, but haven't really heard, and like in that grand final as well, but didn't really play much last year, weirdly. So I'm keen to watch him run around because I feel like he definitely should have played more footy last year, especially when Latrell was out. And then Richie Kenner, and I believe he's an ex-Bulldog. I've heard of him, but doesn't excite me too much, to be honest. And there's nothing else really there. Davey Mole and Michael Cheekham probably trying to get themselves into the 17 or close to the 17, but that's about it. And then Manly, running my eyes over it quickly. Once again, not much doing. This is just a reserve grade game, basically, but we will go over the side. You got Jake Toby, Christian Tuipulotu, Jackson Ferris. Oh, there are some names here. Fletcher Myers, Raymond Tuamalo Vega. Hang on. Sorry, one sec. Cooper Johns, Jamie Humphreys, Tafoa Sipley, Gordon Chen Kum Tong, Ben Condon, Ben Travojevic at second row, Samuele Fane, Ethan Bullymore, Wilson, Zach Fulton, Cameron Brown, and Viliami Fafita, who I believe is a Bulldogs fan, if I remember correctly. Yeah, not much doing in this game. Cooper Johns, obviously he signed with Manly from the Storm, trying to keep his career alive. Jackson Ferris, he's another Jets player that won that grand final a few years back, and they had a stacked side, and he's obviously left the Sharks now, and he's at Manly. He was always like a good player. When I was watching the Jets games, I liked Jackson Ferris. Good name as well. Ben Travojevic, obviously sort of sneaking his way into the Manly side. Tafoa Sipley, he'd be trying to nag a bench spot, I believe. So he's probably wanting a good game. And Zach Fulton, obviously he had a cracker game against the Roosters in the whole Rainbow Round fiasco. Let's move on to the Panthers versus Eels game. For the Panthers, they've named both teams actually haven't really named full strength sides at all, but that's always exciting because you get the rookie bowl. You get to find out who is next up. Isaiah Longy, Jesse McLean, Suni Taruva, obviously you probably have heard of him. Tom Jenkins, Deson Amit Uene, Kurt Falls, Jack Cogger, probably heard of both of them, or at least one if you're not a Bulldogs fan. Lindsay Smith, Luke Summerton, Liam Henry, Jamae Salmon at second roll, I find interesting. Zach Hosking. There we go. I knew I'd heard of Zach Hosking. Is that not the dude that was at the Sharks? And I was like, bro, I've heard of him. Hang on a second. Wait 1 second. Oh, that was Blake Hosking. So there you go. I wonder if they're brothers. I wonder if they're related. Interesting. I was like, bro, I've heard of that name before. Sorry, Zach Hosking, Matt Eisenhuth, and then the bench is Connor Mason, Lisate, Maverick Guy is one to watch, and Harrison Hassett. And then in the depth, I have heard of a couple of these blokes. Actually, one stands out to me, number 26, Cody Lawson. Used to play footy against him. He played for Mudgee. I played for Lithgow. Fun fact about Cody Lawson. His team, Mudgee, they beat us 64-0 like halfway through the season. I think that's the second biggest flogging I've ever got. And then later that year, we ran into them in the semifinals and we actually beat them 16-12, and Cody Lawson broke his finger in that game. So did I break his finger? I'm not going to confirm or deny that, but that's just a little yarn for you to enjoy. Names that stand out to me, obviously Taruva. He's trying to sneak his way into the Panthers side. He killed it for Fiji, and everyone's had their eyes on him. Kurt Falls, I like him. He played against the Bulldogs during Origin. He's got a bit about him. Jack Cogger, an ex-Bulldogs player, trying to basically the Sean O'Sullivan for the Panthers this year. Salmon at second row, I find interesting because I didn't know he could play second row. And then Maverick Guy, probably want to keep my eye on him as well as he's coming up through the system. And then just lots of depth there that are just all blokes coming through the system that are next up. It'll probably show us our Panthers going to stay where they are at the top of the table or not, really. Like, it's a real test of their depth now that players are leaving, so that'll be good to watch. For the Eels, they've got Sean Russell, Matthew Komolave, Samuel Lazau, Zach Sini, Isaac Lumi, Jordan Rankin, Jake Arthur, Offa Hickey Ogden, Josh Hodson, Kai Rodwell, Sean Lane, Jerome Momasi, Ryan Madison, Matt Dory, Mitch Rain, Wiramu Greg, and Makasi Makatoa. And then in the depth, Hayes Dunster's there, Junior Paulo's there, Jack Murchie. So it looks like they will be using that entire bench, like, not because they have to, but just because they want to. Zach Sini, he's that young ranger from the Tigers that had that. I think he scored a double on debut or at least one. He was a bit of a cult hero at the Tigers. He had all his family there watching him and stuff. So they obviously have let him go. I don't think he played last year. I'm not sure if he was at the Eels or Tigers last year, but now he gets a run in the trials for the Eels. Isaac Lumi, another cult hero. He was at Storm when he became a cult hero. Was a bit average. Signed with the Bulldogs, never played for the Bulldogs, though, only like trained and played cup. And now, obviously, he's getting a run with the Eels. Jacob Arthur, don't need to go into details about why that name stands out, but will be good to see the grand final try scorer have a run to start 2023, especially with Mitch Moses potentially leaving. Obviously, Jake Arthur, he'd be the one to fill that hole. Josh Hodson, his first game back since his big injury, and also his first game in the blue and gold, or blue and yellow, whatever you want to call the Eels. Also keep in mind that this is his first game since it became public knowledge that he has the biggest biceps in the NRL. So if you're watching this game, look out for his arms. I don't think you'll miss them. They're pretty big. Sean Lane and Ryan Madison, obviously, they'll be in the 17 somewhere. So a bit of strength in the forward pack there. Mitch Rain, the backup hooker. If Josh Hodson does keep getting hurt, he'll be the one to take over the reins, pun intended, for the Eels hooking role. So probably keep your eye on him as well. Let's move on to the Dragons versus St. Helens game. I'm not going to go over the St. Helens team because like, it doesn't interest me that much. They're only Super League, but it is kind of cool. Just running my eyes over it, though, they look to be full strength from what I know about them. Jack Wellesby, you know what? Do keep your eye on him. He killed it for England in the World Cup, and I think a lot of NRL teams are after him. But, like, if you read this team list, there are a lot of blokes, a lot of names that I recognize either from the World Cup or just from what you hear about Super League, like Will Hopewade, obviously ex-Bulldogs legend. You got Tommy Mackison, World Cup hero. Johnny Lomax sounds familiar to me. Alex Walmsley, he's one of the best props over there. Sion Matty-Utah used to play for the Knights. Joey Lussick on the bench and Curtis Sirenen on the bench as well. So, and Connie Hurrell is in the reserves, back, not really back in the NRL, but back playing rugby league in Australia. So there are some names there, but the Dragons side, all right, sorry, that was a bit of an inappropriate sigh. I'm getting puffed. All right, so Trace Stewart, Matthew Figay, Moses Sully, Zach Lomax, Michaeli Ravelara, Connor Mullison, Moses Emby at halfback, Francis Molo, Jacob Little, Blake Laurie, Ben Murdoch, Masilla, Billy Burns, Jaden Hunt, Tautau Moga, Max Fagay, I don't know how to say their last name. NRL, please teach us how to say their names. Michael Molo and Joshua Corrick, kind of like Kotrick without the T. And then the depth, Josh Cook sort of stands out to me there, but nobody else. All right, so obviously Max and Matthew Fagay, they're beginning to break out onto the NRL scene. Moses Sully had a good season last year, and he's looking to lock up that center role. Obviously, Zach Lomax and Ravelara are there. They'll be there as well. So the back five is almost what their back five will be, you'd imagine, because Matthew Fagay did have that sort of locked in. Sloan's playing All-Stars, so that actually makes sense. So that back five with Sloan at fullback is what you'd assume they line up round one at pending injuries and stuff. So that's interesting, because then you got Connor Mullison and Moses Emby in the halves, which you'd think if Moses Emby was going to be the 5'8" round one, you'd play him at 5'8" and not halfback. So him being named at halfback sort of suggests maybe they're going to try and get Jack Bird at 5'8", even though he's injured and might not be back for round one. So that is interesting. Little at hooker, you'd assume means they're going to go with him round one, because like once again, Moses Emby, I thought maybe he was going to be hooker, but you'd probably start him at hooker in the trial game if he's going to be your hooker. So you'd assume Little's got that hooker role, and Emby must be the 14 for the Dragons. Not much else there. Ben Murdoch Masilla, he's signed with them from the Warriors. I haven't seen him in predicted 17, so he's probably trying to get himself into the 17. But not much doing for the Wooden Spoon favourites there. They're not really Wooden Spoon favourites. I just think they'll get the Wooden Spoon. All right, 4 games on the Sunday. Talk about Super Sunday. There's footy on from like 1:50 until like 9-10 p.m. So I'm licking my lips just looking at Sunday night. However, I won't be watching all those games because I'm going to the Raiders Bulldogs game at Aquaman Oval in Maruya the first week of trials. I'm making a 3 to 4 hour each way road trip to get to that game. So if you're at the Bulldogs Raiders game, come say hi to me. I'll sign your hot dogs. But before the Bulldogs Raiders game is on, there is the Storm Roosters game. And from memory, it's sort of half strength, half not strength for both sides. So the Storm side is Falogo at fullback, Will Warbrick, Remy Smith, Justin Olam, Dean Iremi. I know how to say his name, but I forget it. Tyron Wishart, Jonah Pezzett, Aaron Penne, Bronson Garlick, Christian Welch, Joe Chan, Chris Lewis, Josh King, Golgion, Tonamapea, Jordan Grant, and Elise Katoa. And then in the depth, Keegan Russell Smith. That sounds familiar to me. I don't know why. Grant Anderson. And that's basically it. So obviously they're centers, Smith and Olam. You'd expect them to be the centers come round one with Coates and then either Iremi or Meaney on the wings. You'd assume Meaney might get a run at either 5'8" or fullback, with Munster being the other one until Pappenhausen comes back. Wishart and Pezzett. Wishart, he was sort of their 14, and I'm keen to see how he gets used again because he did all right, to be honest. And then Jonah Pezzett, he's one to watch, a young guy who they've just had in their system sort of sitting there. Like you think your Scotty Drinkwaters and your Pappenhausens that they never brought into first grade, but they sat behind like Slater at that time, who was in first grade, and they end up being these breakout stars. So Jonah Pezzett, he's one to watch. He's one of those guys in the Storm system that is going to kill it, I think. Bronson Garlick, I'm pretty sure he's an ex-Bulldogs legend, so keep your eye on him. Chris Lewis, Josh King, Christian Welch, obviously all starters. Christian Welch coming back from that ACL injury that ended his season last year. And then Elise Katoa from the Warriors, who had like a really good string of games, or even a good season a couple of years ago at the Warriors. So I think Storm will get the best out of him, and he'll be even a fantasy smoky. But the Roosters side, Ethan King, possibly the next James Tedesco, Alfred Smalley, Joseph Suali'i, Junior Porgar, Jackson Paulo, Luke Keary, Sam Walker, Lindsay Collins, Brandon Smith, Matty Lodge, Egan Butcher, Siu Wong, Victor Radley, Drew Hutchison, Fletcher Baker, Jake Turbin, and Terrell May. And in the extended bench, Sandon Smith and Tui Pelotu Katoa do stand out to me. As I said, that's half weak, half strong. Obviously, so we're getting our first look at Suali'i as a center. That it doesn't confirm that Suali'i will be center round one, but it suggests that he will be so they'll have Tupou, Manu, Suali'i, and then maybe Paulo on the wing. Keary and Walker as the halves full strength there, in the forward pack close to full strength. Lindsay Collins, Matthew Lodge, and Cheese at hooker. His first game for the Roosters with Victor Radley at lock, Butcher and Wong second rows. Haven't heard of Wong, but obviously Butcher and Baker I've heard of on the bench. Hutchison trying to get that 14 jersey come round one with Terps, also fighting for that 14 jersey, and Terrell May in there as well. Let's move on to the most important game of the week. It is the Canberra Raiders up against the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. Now, I've got a lot to talk about with this Bulldogs lineup. Let's get into the Raiders first, though. From memory, they're not that full strength, and the Bulldogs should put 70 or 80 points on them. You got, jokes. Obviously, in trial games, you sort of only play if you've named a full strength team, you're probably only playing for 30 to 40, maybe 60 minutes max, like in trials to avoid injuries and stuff. So I wouldn't expect 70 to 80 points, but I want 70 to 80 points. The Raiders side, Xavier Savage, Albert Hopewade, Jared Croker, Brad Morkos, Elijah Anderson, Matt Frawley, Brad Snyder, Ate Marotta, Danny Levi at hooker with Emre Gula, Clay Webb, Trey Mooney, Corey Horsburgh, Zach Wolford, Pasami Solo, Jordan Martin, and James Schiller. And I don't recognize anyone in the reserves except Lockie Lewis, but that's not the Lockie Lewis. But the real cup of tea here is the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs side. Obviously, now when you're talking preseason challenge, there's only one team that anyone wants to watch, and that's the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. Let's take a look. Braden Burns at fullback, Jacob Carraz and Jaden Ockenbaugh are on the wings, Avarillo and Alamotti at center, Josh Reynolds, the man, the myth, the Prince of Belmore. Josh, you are Reynolds. You're not mishearing that, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, Josh Reynolds is at 5'8". That gets me really, 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 really excited. Can you, mate, we'll come back to it. Mate, my heartbeat's just beating, just reading that like it hits different. You hear it, you read rumors, but when you're looking at a team list on the NRL app and it says Josh Reynolds and it's not just a dude that shares a name with him like Lockie Lewis for the Raiders, like that's the actual Josh Reynolds, and it doesn't have his picture there yet, but I'm picturing him in my head, and it's good stuff. Kyle Flanagan at halfback, Luke Thompson at prop, Reed Marnie. Oh, mate, I love the Bulldogs so much. Reed Marnie at hooker, Max King at prop, Jacob Preston of hashtag Preston Media fame at second row, Raymond Fatala Malona at second row. Ryan Sutton at lock. For Manu Brown, Chris Patolo, Andrew Davey, and Corey Waddell are the bench. And you know what? Screw it. I'm going into the extended bench because that's how important the Bulldogs are. Gerald Skelton, Jackson Torpenay, Bailey Haywood, Harrison Edwards, Khaled Rajab, Jaden Tanner, Curtis Morin, Blake Wilson, Joish Papali'i, Ryan Gray, and Franklin Pele are the extended bench. If that's not one of the greatest extended benches ever, then I'm not here. But let's get deep into what this lineup means for you Bulldog fans. So obviously Braden Burns at fullback. A lot of people were questioning that decision. It's simply that Hayes Perham's our fullback and he's playing All-Stars. So that solves that issue. Kuraz and Ockenbo are the wingers. Obviously Kuraz will be one wing. Ockenbo, he's not going to be the other wing. Josh Adokar is going to be the other wing. But he's just out. He's not injured, but he's resting. He put out of the All-Stars game. And obviously, he's not going to play trials either. He's just trying to get his body right and his mind right, I believe. Josh Reynolds at 5'8". Obviously, he's now in the top 30 squad, got off his train and trial. He's only 33, guys. So keep in mind that he's actually not that old. He just has been injured a lot recently. But if he can stay healthy, he could be back to his best. He could be playing Origin. He's at 5'8" because Matt Burton's being arrested. And so obviously he's going to have it. Josh Reynolds is going to have a crack at trying to get himself a bench utility spot, or maybe he'll just play that good that he steals Matt Burton, who is now our captain. Maybe Josh Reynolds gets picked over Matt Burton. He's that good. Kyle Flanagan at halfback. It's good to see that he's actually going to be given a real crack at the 7 jersey. And obviously we haven't signed a 7 yet. So hopefully he can play some really, really good footy before we sign one. And then we don't have to sign one, because if he plays what he played like at the Roosters, he's a good player, man. Thompson and King are going to be your front rowers with Reed Marnie at hooker. Jacob Preston is one that you probably don't recognize. Now, obviously, Kickow would normally be second row, but Jacob Preston hasn't stolen his spot. Kickow's being rested. Jacob Preston we signed him from the Roosters. He was like their captain. He might have been an Australian schoolboy as well. And Gus Gould has massive raps on him, just not from his time at the Roosters, but his time at the Bulldogs in preseason when asked who has been the most exciting, who's a smoky for round one, etc. Gould says Jacob Preston. So not even keep your eye on him. You're gonna have to keep your eye on him because I think he's gonna be in the 17 come round one off the bench, and he's got a nice mullet. NRL Twitter, Bulldogs Twitter love Jacob Preston. I love Jacob Preston. It's exciting for him and exciting for us fans because he's just a bucket full of potential and gets a start in the trial match. Raymond Fatala Mariner, obviously, and Ryan Sutton at lock. Now, Tavita Pangai Jr. is also being rested in this game. I don't know if Tavita will be locked with Sutton off the bench, or will Tavita be front row with King or Thompson off the bench, or will Tavita come off the bench? I'm not sure which one it'll be. But obviously it'll be one of them, and I dare say we'll find out in the Sharks trial. But for now, it's Ryan Sutton against his old club at lock. Full Manu Brown, 14. It'll be him or Reynolds, I dare say, as 14 in round one. So he's back in the blue and white, just like Josh Reynolds. Full Manu Brown's now back in the blue and white, and he played really good at the Tigers. It's weird because I feel like they both left sort of at the same time as well. Full Manu Brown didn't go to the Tigers, but he's coming from the Tigers now. Like both their last NRL teams was the Tigers, and now they're back. It's a bit weird, and they're both fighting each other for that 14 spot. Patolo, Davian, Waddell, obviously they're the bench for the trial, but with Pangai Jr. and Kickow to come back into this side, 2 of those players would have to drop off the bench. But I'd like Torpenay on the bench with Kickow, not Kickow and Tavita, but obviously like with them coming back in the squad, you've got the 3 people on the bench here. I want one of the 3 bench spots to be Torpenay, and then like Preston and Sutton, for example. So what I'm trying to say is I personally would like those 3 players to all fall off the bench. I like Davey. Don't get me wrong. I like Davey. I don't rate Waddell at all. Patolo's all right, but I like Davey. So I'd prefer, ideally, my bench would be Torpenay, Tavita, and Preston, with Sutton starting at lock, Kickow starting at second row, And then I'd use Tavita as a prop, but also sort of like he can sort of cover anywhere. And then I'd use Torpene as a second row lock, and then Preston as a second row. That would be my bench, but I don't know what'll happen. And then I'm not going to go into depth in the reserves, but just so many players to watch, fighting for spots, fighting for respect and fan approval and all the good stuff. It's exciting times for the Bulldogs. Let's quickly get through the other two games. All right, the other games, Cowboys versus Dolphins and Broncos versus Titans. Obviously, both not Queensland Cup games because that's a competition, but like Queensland versus Queensland team. I forget what they call their games. They've got the 4X Derby. I wonder if the Dolphins will be part of the 4X Derby. The Cowboys side, Tom Chester, Moki Duraki, Shabuski, Brendan Elliott, Robert Derby, Ben Hampton, Thomas Duffy, Zadruga, Snyder, James Tarmo, Jack Gosowski. I'm so sorry. Jack Gosowski, Finafukika. Please, NRL, get us a video of the players saying their names. Please, just do it, man. Just do it. Riley Price. Oh my God. Dejazhe Pua Avase, Sylvester Namo, Marley Bitangani, and Julian Christian. I'm so sorry, guys. I know you don't listen to the podcast, but I'm still sorry. The Dolphins side, Jermaine Asako, Jack Bostock, Tessie New, Ewan Aitken, Oliver Gildart, Anthony Milford, Isaiah Katoa, Jared Wallace, Harrison Graham, Herman Sa, Jeremiah Simbikin, Connor Lemalu, Ray Stone, Braden McGrady, Valence Tavale, I believe it's pronounced, Tyler. I can pronounce that, but I can't pronounce anyone else's names. Tyler Sepenowski, Lachlan Hubner, and then the reserves. For this game, Tom Chester, he's sort of a young up-and-comer. Brendan Elliott, I believe he's from the Manly Sea Eagles. He's looking for a return to the NRL. Ben Hampton, there's a name I haven't heard in a long time. James Tarmo now at the Cowboys for what will be, I dare say, his last season. And then from the Dolphins, Jermaine Asako looks to have gotten that fullback jersey. Tessie New at center. Interesting because I thought he would have been backup fullback or just fullback. Ewan Aitken is going to be center and not second row, which is interesting, but makes sense because they've got a stacked forward pack, but not backs. Milford looks to have locked in the 5'8" jersey. They'd have named it Katoa here at halfback, but I'd assume Sean O'Sullivan gets first crack at the 7 jersey. Lots of people have raps on Isaiah Katoa, but I'm going to say it here on the podcast. I'm going to be the first person to say this, and in 6 months, I'm going to look back on this, and I'm going to be an idiot, or I'm going to be completely right. I don't rate Isaiah Katoa that much at all. I've seen him play Panthers games with my mate, so like SG Ball Flag, even his New South Wales Cup debut, and like he is good. He's got footwork. He can throw short balls and stuff, but his game management, especially under pressure, isn't that good. I remember he had the game where he kicked the match-winning field goal, and all the headlines are about him getting the match-winning field goal to win the game and finish a comeback. He missed 3 or 4 field goals prior to the one he kicked, and not only did he miss field goals, he also could not set up a field goal at all. Like, we're talking just absolutely incapable of actually setting up a field goal. And that's sort of game management kind of stuff. And under pressure, he just doesn't seem to be able to like do that. And maybe with age, he will get better at doing it, especially with Wayne Bennett coaching him. But when he was at Panthers in like playing flag and ball, he couldn't game manage under pressure, like almost at all. It was kind of hard to watch, just his inability to set up a field goal, which usually you go like 3 forwards up. Like we're not talking from working out of his own line either. This is inside the 40, like in field goal range the entire set. And he just couldn't set up a field goal in golden points. So, you know, look, I hope I'm not going to death ride him or anything. I do hope he does well. But from what I've seen of him, I don't think he's as good as he's being hyped up to be. Jared Wallace and Herman Essa. I don't think Herman Essa will be a starting prop, but you'd imagine Wallace would be. And Ray Stone lock. Obviously, he did his ACL scoring a magical try for the Eels against the Storm last year. Q clip well, obviously not Q clip, but go YouTube it. It's actually such a good watch. And mate, him coming back and now at the Dolphins as well. That'll be good to see how he goes. Let's move on to the final preseason challenge game of the round before we go over the All-Stars and then wrap this podcast up. The Broncos have Reese Walsh, Jordan Pereira, Katoni Staggs, Herbie Farnsworth, Dean Mariner or or something. Who knows? NRL, please. Just give us a video, man. Just give us a video. Ezra Mam, Jack Ahern, Thomas Flegler, Corey Pakes, Payne Haas, Shalom Oofu, Brendan Frey, Corey Jensen, Billy Walters, Logan Bayless Brow, Marty Tapau, and Benjamin Tekuru, Tyson Smoothie, and Tristan Sale are ones to watch in the reserves as well. Obviously, Reese Walsh, he's got the fullback position at the Broncos. Ezra Mem, 5'8". Corey Pakes over Billy Walters at hooker is interesting because in the predicted lineups that I've been seeing going around, everyone was expecting Walters to be hooker with Pakes at 14, and they're the other way in this trial game. So that is interesting, especially if you're a fantasy player. Pakes could be a smoky to throw in your side. Haas in a trial game is interesting. Obviously, he had some time off, I think, actually, because of mental health. So you'd assume they're trying to just make sure he's ready to rip and tear. Marty Tapau obviously signed with the Broncos over the preseason, and that he'll be looking to get back into form. The Titans, Jaden Campbell, Khan Pereira. I wonder if he's related to Jordan Pereira because it looks like they're marking each other. Aaron Shop at the Titans and not at the Bulldogs. Wow, man. I miss Aaron Shop. Philip Sami, Jojo Fafita, Toby Sexton, Tanner Boyd, Jamin Jolliffe, Chris Randall, Joe Stimson, David Fafita, Cleese Haas, who I do believe is Payne Haas's younger brother. Be good to see them go up against each other. Aaron Clark, Sam McIntyre, Isaac Fasumalaleu. Please, NRL. Joe Vuna, Trayman Spry, and Thomas Weaver I recognize, but nobody else. Ryan Foran, I guess. Maybe Kieran Foran's son. I don't know. So it looks like Jaden Campbell will be well, actually, I don't know, because Brimson's not named. I'd imagine Brimson will be fullback with Tanner Boyd and Foran in the halves. And then I guess Randall at hooker. Sexton misses out and Campbell to the bench is what I'd expect. So it's weird they've named Campbell at fullback and not off the bench or just in the middle. But that's the Titans for you, I guess. Aaron Shop obviously signed from the Bulldogs to the Titans. He gets his first go away from the Bulldogs. Joe Stimson, ex-Bulldogs legend. David Fafita getting a run in the trials, trying to find his form again. And that's sort of it. Thomas Weaver, he's a really good up-and-coming halfback in the Titans system. Now, they're good at getting the best halves and then them turning into nothing. Take Ash Taylor, for example. But Thomas Weaver, he's a really, really good. I'm pretty sure he's like the Australian schoolboys halfback and stuff. So keep your eye on him. But that is all the preseason games. Before we finish this podcast, let's have a look at one more team lineup. Man, I'm actually puffed from reading out these names. Let's have a run over the All-Stars game. Obviously, we sort of previewed it last podcast, but now we have the official lineups. Since then, there have been a lot of players pulling out as well. And I think last podcast, I did say I thought Indigenous would win, but it would come down to how they line up. And now, looking at the lineups, it's the Indigenous All-Stars should win by 40. To be honest, they genuinely should win by 40. That's not even hyperbolic. Just based off on paper, the All-Stars Indigenous will win by 40 points. That's my official prediction. All right, so the Māori All-Stars, Hayes, Perrin Bulldogs, legend is at fullback with Morgan Harper, ex-Bulldogs legend, on a wing. Jordan Rapana is the other winger. We get to see his goal kicking again, hopefully one of the worst goal kickers ever. Jesse Arthurs and Adam Pompey at centre. Zach Docker-Clay, another ex-Bulldogs legend at 5'8", with Paul Turner, never heard of him, at halfback. James Fisher-Harris and Royce Hunt, my fantasy saviour, at front rows, with Corey Harawira-Nara, another Bulldogs ex-legend, at hooker, which is very concerning because he's not a hooker, he's a second rower. Joseph Tarpanay is the lock, with Bryden Nakora and Jordan Ricky. Oh, that sounded cool. At second row, Zane Musgrove, Leo Thompson, Tukamiya Simpkins, Austin Dyer, Sheldon Patima. Oh, no, wait, they only play 17. So, I'll go. The reserve, Sheldon Patima, Credence Toya, another ex-Bulldogs legend, and Preston Ricky, other reserves / the bench. Not a great team for the Māori All-Stars, if I'm being honest. Obviously, they would have had Manu, which would have helped them out a bit, at least. I dare say Manu would have been 5'8" with Zach Docker-Clay at hooker. But now with Manu dropping out, it's just sort of screwed them all over. They've still got a better forward pack. Credit where it's due, their forward pack is still better. But like when you got Zach Docker-Clay, who doesn't have an NRL contract, and Paul Turner, who I haven't heard of as your halves, it's hard to see you winning games of football, bruh. All right, the Indigenous All-Stars: Latrell Mitchell, Selvin Cobbo, Jack White and Brent Naden, Tyrell Sloan, Cody Walker, Nico Hines, Josh Kerr, Kieran Mosley, Shaq Mitchell, Tyrell Fuimano. I can say his name in my head. Tyrell Fuimano, Tyrone Peachy, Jermaine Hopgood, Albert Kelly, Jermaine Tanua-Brown, Dane Laurie, and Isaiah Tass, Ryan James, Braden Trindle, and Bailey Butler. Now, the Indigenous All-Stars, not only is their forward pack not as good as the Māori All-Stars forward pack, but they don't have much forwards on the bench, like Albert Kelly, Dane Laurie, Isaiah Tass, Trindle. I'm not sure about Butler, but all those others are definitely backs. Butler's not. So Trindle, Laurie, Tass. Oh no. Yeah, they're all backs. So the forwards are going to be going through a lot of work. That's the only way the Māori All-Stars win this game, is through the middle. With obviously they've got forwards on the bench, and just their forwards are better in my opinion. But when you look at the back line for the All-Stars, like Mitchell, Cobbo, White, and Naden, Sloan, Walker, Hines, the game's called All-Stars, and that's an All-Star back line. Like, that's sort of what you expect when you talk an All-Stars. Like, you're putting Whiten, who's a Dally M medalist, at center because your halves are that good. I don't see the Indigenous All-Stars losing this game. And as I said, I think All-Stars can win this by 40. I genuinely think that. So the All-Stars game is kicking off at 3:45 on Saturday. That's the preseason challenge lineups. That is the All-Stars lineup. I'll do a quick prediction of who I think will win the preseason games, although it doesn't matter that much because it's only preseason. Tigers, Warriors. I'm going to go with the Tigers. Knights, Sharks. I'm going to go Knights because the Sharks team wasn't that strong. I'm going to go Knights in that game. Souths, Manly. Sorry for whistling in the mic. That probably hurt your ears. Souths, Manly. I'm going to go Manly, I guess. Hard to predict. Panthers, Eels. I'm actually going to go Eels in this one. Oh, you know what? No, I'm going to go Panthers in this one. I'm going to go Panthers. I think St. Helens will beat Dragons by a lot, to be honest. Storm, Roosters. I think Roosters will win that one. I genuinely think Bulldogs will beat the Raiders, but put your house on that. Cowboys, Dolphins. I like the Dolphins in this one. I'm going to go Dolphins. And then Broncos, Titans. I think the Titans get the job done there. I dare say I'm going for a couple of upsets, but that's my predictions. Thanks for listening to the Dog Dish. Enjoy the footy being back, ladies and gentlemen.